I had a very painful situation with one of my sisters come up. I write about it in the new book, but she was in a bad relationship, in a bad situation. And I was talking to my therapist and being like, what am I going to do? I was like crying. I'd done everything that I could do to try to get her out of this abusive relationship. And my therapist was like, what are you going to do? And I was like, yeah, what am I going to do? And she was like, what makes you think you know what your sister needs to learn in this lifetime? And I was like, you think she needs to learn it in this horrible relationship? And she's like, I don't know. I'm not God, but neither are you. And she's like, Tara, I'm not saying that you shouldn't save your sister. I'm saying you cannot. It is actually impossible.
Right.
And that really shifted something for me because I thought I would be a bad sister. She was like, she has to figure it out. And I was like, well, what do I do in the meantime? And she was like, how about draw some boundaries, protect yourself?
Mm-hmm.
And I did. And eventually she got herself out. And I supported her, of course, the moment she was ready to get out. But the most important aspect of that story is that my sister got to be the hero in her life,
Mm-hmm.
not me saving her and her still feeling bad about herself,
Yeah.
right? So I think that if you're struggling with this control issue or high functioning codependent, I see you, I understand. I have no doubt that your heart is in the right place because I know yours is and I know mine is and was, but there's a reality that you really only have control over yourself. And a loving thing to do is to, instead of telling your friend or your mother or your sister what to do, is to ask them, what do they think they should do? What does your gut instinct say? Because it's your life and really how you feel and what you think, that's the thing that matters,
Yeah.
right? Because what you said before is we don't want to see them in pain. But
Mm-hmm.
when we really love someone, we have to be able to tolerate how their pain makes us feel and hang with them anyway. That's really loving,
Yeah.
is to be like, this sucks and I'm here.
Right.
Not here to control you or you better do what I think. I'm here. I love you. I know this is hard. That sounds terrible.
And I think the I'm here, I love you is to the capacity that you can with a boundary, right? It doesn't mean like you have to be in the same room. You have to allow and let it, whatever the situation may be, let it bring you down, but not feel the need to control them. So I've created boundaries where I hold her at a wider distance,
Yes,
but I didn't take her out of my life
correct.
because I have to, like you said, protect my side of the street,
Yes,
make sure her stuff isn't dirtying my side of the street, but also I can say, hi, I see you there
right.
and I still love you.
Yes. And I support you in what you're doing, or I support you in your healing. But again, realizing and having faith that every person we love is on their own journey, just like my sister was, right? And none of us are God.
Yeah. So with me, I grew up with my mom always being very chaotic household and dealing with a lot of mental health problems. But what would you say for a person that maybe their best friend, their safeguard switched, whether it be because of financial struggles, whether it be because of addiction, life changes.
Mm-hmm.
Now this person that they admired, they loved, switched.
Right. So how do you have boundaries with that? And
Yeah.
how do you not take that on?
Yes.
Well, again, that is very similar to the situation that I was in with my sister. And it's emotionally very difficult. But the same truth applies, which is that if you love someone who is, let's say, suffering from addiction challenges, you cannot make them stop. They have to reach their own bottom. So it's all about self care. It's all about taking care of yourself. It's all about having healthy boundaries. And you can love people from afar. I say about, because I have a lot of addiction in my family of origin, and that if you've ever loved an alcoholic or an addict, there's this phrase that says alcoholics don't have relationships, they take hostages, because that's what it's like.
You know what's so interesting though? My dad dealt with addiction his whole life. And I think because I met him as an addict, my stepdad, I never saw him that way. I saw him as, even though he was an addict, he was like a sweet addict.
Mhm.
So I think like every time like my mom wanted to be like, but he's an addict, change the look that you have of him.
Yeah,
I'd be like, but he's a big teddy bear.
right.
But I love him.
Mhm.
Like he's a sweet soul. And I think for me, I somehow was able to give grace to him, but not give grace to my mom while going through her mental health struggles.
Right. But part of that is if someone is not harming you actively, even if they're harming themselves, right? If
Mm-hmm.
he was an addict, he was certainly harming himself. But if it didn't manifest as like violence and screaming and door slamming and chaos, and there was still a sweetness to him,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you're a kid, even as a teenager, you're not going to be like, oh, but I shouldn't think that's okay.
Yeah.
All we can do is relate to people the way they're relating to us, basically, especially when we're kids, because we're kind of a captive audience.
Yeah.
So it makes sense to me that if you didn't have these horrible experiences with him, that you wouldn't have that view,
Right.
you know?
But then, and I imagine, what if those two people mix into one, where it's like you had this sweet, safe person, and out of nowhere they switched and you saw a different version? That has to be so debilitating of, I need to fix
Yes.
because that's not the person I knew.
Yeah. Oh, it's incredibly painful.
Yeah. And the release of control must be really hard because of that, of you wanting to go back to the person they were before.
Yes. And how I felt about it, and I think a lot of people would feel this way, is that I'm being a bad sister or a bad daughter or a bad whatever if I don't. Like, it never even entered my mind until my therapist was like, you don't have the power. What you're trying to do, you actually don't have the power to do. She has to choose. But I felt like if I didn't keep trying every single day, that I was a terrible person. And it really was liberating for me to understand through that therapeutic process that I could look at my sister and have faith that she was going to figure it out. That doesn't mean, listen, not everyone, especially with addiction, not everyone does, but she did. And I made a promise that if she was ready to get out of that relationship, I would help her, and I did. But it was her. She had to have the impetus to change, not me being like, you don't deserve this, not me being like, don't you care about yourself? All the things that we try
Yeah.
to do with addicts, it doesn't work. And it is painful.
Yeah.
That's where boundaries come in.